And my name is Isaac Bartz, and my counterpart is Caitlin Morse. We are the inbound and outbound product manager for the DPMs and Service Builder solution. So we'll be hosting the session today. We'll let Argonne introduce themselves in just a minute, but if you could, during the presentation, if you have questions, please use the question and answer box. We'll be monitoring that, and then you can use the chat for more of a generic chat during the session. So again, my name is Isaac Bartz. I'm dialing in from Northwest Arkansas. Caitlin?
Hi, I just put in the chat. Thought I'd help get that kicked off. I'm coming to you from Pennsylvania, very close to Hershey, if you're familiar with Hershey chocolate and Hershey Park.
Awesome. Again, please use the question and answer box. We'll go ahead and hand things over to Jack and Mike from Argonne National Laboratory.
Cool, thanks. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jack Schmidt. I've been with Argonne since 2013 in the service management department. I'm responsible for making sure all of our ITIL processes work together. And I'm also the process owner currently for change, configuration management, asset management, and a couple other things while we get through some projects. I also chair the National Lab DOE ServiceNow community practice where the DOE National Lab reps get together and we discuss issues in building out solutions using ServiceNow. Mike?
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I'm Mike Kukla. I work with Jack at Argonne National Labs. My primary focus is process owner and manager for service level management and incident manager at Argonne. I'm also an ITIL V3 expert and ITIL V4 managing professional. Been at the lab since 2016 and kind of in a humorous way, Jack and I met years before we worked at Argonne as part of ITIL process meetings. So, you know, processes brought us back together as friends. So.
Before we get into our talk, Mike and I thought it'd be good to give you a little history of where we work. So Argonne National Lab was one of the first DOE labs. It was formed in 1946, and it was primary focus was to develop peaceful uses for nuclear power. Today, Argonne is a premier multi-purpose lab with initiatives ranging from clean energy to hard X-ray sciences hosted at our many on-site research facilities. In 2013, the lab operations IT division selected ServiceNow as our ITSM platform to ensure that IT aligned with the needs of the business. Now, with more than 3,400 employees and 1,400 scientists, lab operations uses the ServiceNow platform to deliver offerings that range from HR to facilities to finance.
One of our early goals was to provide our customers with a service-based Amazon-like experience. Originally, we tracked incidents and changes like most IT organizations, and our user interface really had two items. I want something and something's broken. By the way, we call our user portal Vector. In 2021, we focused on standing up ServiceNow Service Portal and to build our catalog items and how-to guides to help our scientists and employees get their job done. We updated our process by requesting new catalog items, and we worked with the development teams to get them built out and added to the catalog. We even created a survey around the Vector experience so users could give us feedback on our portal. Since we started this effort, we created or updated numerous catalog items, but something was missing.
Are we delivering what our customers want and need? It's an age-old question service management tries to solve. To address this question, we created a service delivery governance board with representatives from across lab operations to help manage the service. We even made it a role requiring training in our HR system. We then took advantage of the Swiss Army knife set of tools from ServiceNow, service portfolio management to define services and offerings, performance analytics, and reports for building dashboards. But sadly, there's nothing that gets you started out of the box around service management. And then there's surveys for measuring customer satisfaction, but those examples lean more toward how did the service desk technician help you versus are you really delivering on the service? To better track the work we were doing, we updated our incident forms so service providers could associate services and offerings to incidents. And we customized our ITMs and SC task forms to help build a custom relationship between catalog items and services, because at the time they didn't exist. Mike.
Our trip down the rabbit hole started by initiating our goal to implement what we call, and ITIL calls, service level management. But we felt very late for an important date. A number of years ago, we were a traditional IT organization with undefined service portfolio and ad hoc organization unique reporting. We felt mad as hatters. Since that time, in the smaller early stage, we had focused on defining our services and service offerings, along with gathering data through populating service information on tickets. This is a phase that we had been at for quite some time. We now look to DPM to take us to that taller state where we manage our KPIs and SLAs based on services and common format reporting, then on to continual and process maturity. It is important to note that our growth will be an ongoing iterative process. At this time, our service portfolio spans across nine of the lab's business-focused departments, which can be stated as the non-scientific part of our organization. We have 96 services, of which 38 are from the IT organization. Of the 354 service offerings, 73 are from IT. We also followed a standard definition for these items, with services being those actions which provide value to our customers, otherwise known as business services, or services which support the business service, known as technical services. Service offerings provide a lower level of detail which define the related service and is the lowest level we report services to. The mechanism to request these services are through service requests, of which we currently have 287, and they are executed through our service portal known as Vector. But note, we currently have more service offerings than service requests, and in some cases we have multiple requests for a given service offering. You will see reference in our presentation on the need to focus on our request catalog items. I constantly ask our service owners and service managers, how do your customers request your services? Below the service-related item numbers is an example of one of our service structures existing today for our AV organization. Remember that of these 287 requests, 53 are called record producers. Remember that term for the future and its impact on DPM.
Mike, Argonne has certainly done a lot of work in this space. So while you continue, I'm going to launch a poll for the audience just to kind of get an idea of where everybody else is in their journey. Back to you, Mike.
And actually, before we get too much further, I was wondering, I've actually gotten this question a couple of times recently around getting buy-in across an organization around what a service is and what goes into that definition, along with the offerings. How did you guys get buy-in? And also, how did you come to the framework that you were using to capture some of that key information? Could you talk a little bit about your experience with that?
Yes. Well, one of the things we did was we actually made the service and service offering fields required on an incident. This helped us in our run operations reporting because in traditional IT, the concept of a service is a challenge because we typically think in what can be termed as configuration items or system names. So we really made it a major effort, and we've actually gone through multiple iterations of our service portfolio of what a service is, what our service offerings are. So that's where that iterative process comes in. And then the other part with the implementation of service builder, we were able to link our service offerings to our catalog items, which is helping us a lot. So it's kind of, you know, getting buy-in through mandate. So, and it's starting to change the mindset, because it's in the IT world, it's more of a challenge. In the other parts of our lab operations or business functions, I think they understand that concept better because that's how they talk on a daily basis.
Right. To add on to what Mike said, we did get buy-in, so we do have that service delivery governance board. So before we made the fields required, we talked to them too about the services. And then it probably impacts IT the most because we have the service desk and they have to go into the forms and fill in the fields. So Mike spends a lot of time with them. If anybody comes up with a new service in the offerings, making sure they're aware of what they are and what they represent. So it's not like Mike said, you can't just create it and walk away from it. And we've evolved our services numerous times. The tool is really flexible, so you can change that kind of stuff and not, impact old data. So don't be afraid of the change, I guess.
And it was fun that when we were starting to define our services, we wouldn't let them put application or software names in the services or service offerings, and that created quite a challenge. But they're getting it. So
cool. So as Mike pointed out, we've been on a several year journey to move to true service delivery. And to Caitlin's point, we struggled with cultural change, managing through services instead of organizational silos. I think everybody faces that. And then how do we display our service grouping? So in other words, what's our taxonomy? That was something we struggled with a lot. We couldn't get service owners to use service portfolio management. They found the module clunky and very confusing. And then to get data from catalog items, we had to ask service owners to manually add service information to catalog items. They weren't really thrilled with that extra step. And then the custom reports and dashboards we built, the service owners stopped using them. They said that it was hard to understand the data. And from Mike and my standpoint, it was really hard to maintain. And then we wound up exporting data into Excel spreadsheets. And when you're trying to display that, you couldn't show the backend data. And then when we're showing the information to scientists, they want to see the backend data. So they weren't really happy. We didn't have a way to drill into the things. And our service owners complained that we gave them a Swiss Army knife set of tools. They didn't like trying to remember where they had to bounce around inside of ServiceNow to see the thing they needed to see. So all of these issues drove us to investing in DPM and Service Builder to provide an easy to use interface for managing service delivery information. And so service owners had one view to see how well their services were doing.
Hey there, Jack and Mike, there are a couple of questions that are in the Q&A. Do you want to just take a peek, or I could read a couple off, and we could answer them sort of as we go, since it's in context to some of your content.
yeah, if you could read them off to us. I'm not really a Zoom expert. I'm more of a Teams person. Sorry about that.
Absolutely. Okay, so this one is a pretty quick one. So there's a question around, are you using service offering in the change requests as well as incident?
I'll grab that because I'm the change process owner. At the moment, we aren't using service offering, and that's more of a working with our development team because we require configuration item, service offering, and service in our forms. It's a custom change to the way change works right now, so we want to do that. It's in the development queue, but it's not there yet. But the service owners are actually asking for that capability besides just having a config item.
Okay, great. And then the next question is, it's kind of more of a comment around, requiring a service or offering in the incident form itself is bold, because there has to be a lot of confidence that you have your services defined enough to cover every type of incident. Could you talk a little bit about that? Like maybe explain when you felt confident in requiring that on the form, And if there are still, ways that you're evolving your, services as well.
And I think this goes back to that iterative process on defining those services and service offerings. Um, we really, it was probably through the second major rehaul of our service portfolio in the IT space that we decided to make that change. And actually, one of the things that brought to us was the ability to um, mature our service portfolio, because now we weren't just talking about services, they were requiring the use of it. And we're probably on our third generation of our service portfolio in IT with some major review and overhaul. So, one of the things that's important is that the service portfolio isn't a one and done. It's one that keeps maturing. And we kind of did it as we wanted to drive the fact that we need to start thinking in terms of services for the fact of reporting. And it was actually kind of interesting outside of the IT space in the what we call lab operations space. One of the delivery managers there made the point that they went through a reorg, and by the fact that they were talking in services, not system names or unique characteristic names for CIs, they were able to make that transition with reporting easier.
Well, and to that point, we knew the services weren't probably completely in detail, but Mike went with the service owners. So we're going to have these on incident tickets. Are you confident with your services and your offerings? When they said yes, at least in the IT organization, then we flipped the switch, and Mike meets regularly with the service owners and the service desk to make sure that we have the classifications correctly, if people know how to use the services and things. What we found is by forcing the service and the service offering, instead of making them optional, then you have to make a choice. So then we can discuss, is it the right choice? When it's blank, then you spend all your time going, who should it, which service should it have been? Now we can actually look at the services and say, what do we make the right decision here? Do we got to clean things up? Do we got to make more choices and stuff? So we found it pushed us forward by making it required.
But another question here, what about the reporting? So one of the attendees says they export almost everything for reporting to work with ClickSense or Power BI for their reports. So with Argonne, how well is the ServiceNow reporting interface accepted?
And I think, Jack alluded to that on a previous slide. We were creating multiple dashboards, and we still have a number of them today, which are built off of ServiceNow. And we found those meet the vast majority of our requirements. What DPM is bringing, and we'll talk to it even more through the presentation, is us to set a standard set of values that if somebody asks, where did this value come from, at least all the organizations are dealing with a common report. The biggest problem we had, and I've seen even elsewhere, is when you're talking about the same information in the same meeting and people are showing different numbers, as an example, you run into a lot of issues. So that's why we're driving, DPM as the managerial tool for that kind of level of reporting. And as I'll talk to, it's not an operational tool. At least we don't use it that way. It's a managerial tool.
And we've been using ServiceNow since 2013. We stood up performance analytics when it first came out. We use it. The main areas we use performance analytics is checking the processes, We have a set of dashboards built out to manage our MSP that provides desktop and service desk support. And then DPM is, and if you get into APM and SPM, you'll be using performance analytics to try to pull that out, stick it in Power BI, and build all of that information again. Good luck. But the tool makes it really easy to use in those areas.
I think also building off that, what you just mentioned about MSP. So there is another question around how much of IT is outsourced that this person says, we struggle to align SLAs and OLAs through the company borders, and harmonization of SLAs is a challenge. Have you experienced something similar?
You want to take that, Jack, or you want me to?
You're the service level manager. You can.
Okay. Yeah, our service desk is outsourced, and our endpoint field services. The other part of IT is internal, and the service level, the SLAs are as part of the contract with the MSP. So they know what we're measuring to. The key there, I think, though, is, and I know, it's challenges. We do typically think in KPIs versus SLAs, and that's something as part of our maturing to start becoming more SLA oriented. But right now, we basically made that part of our contract. And it aligns. There's not a differentiation between the MSP requirements and what we do internally.
I'm going to put something in the chat here too, maybe a little bit of direction for the individual who asked that question. So we do have SLO coming out as our source to pay offering. It's going to be launching a supplier performance management portal in November. So just adding a little bit of extra solution that might help you there.
Oh, cool.
Are you guys using APM as well? Is Argonne using APM?
Yes, I'll talk about it a little bit, but we even built our own custom APM module because nobody had it originally. And then we moved to the ServiceNow one when it came out. And we're still fighting some of the customizations we did initially as APM and SPM mature.
And then 2 quick questions here. What level of management and personas has DPM been targeted to?
The target is to, and the lab doesn't have as many levels of structure that you typically find in a private enterprise, I would say.
Right.
But it's targeted to what we would consider extended leadership as well as leadership. So, it's like I said, it's not an operational tool, so it's not meant for the support team. But it's anybody who is doing reporting based on service.
Yeah, but we specifically, like we said, we created a service delivery governance board. So each one of the lab operations areas that participate, HR, facilities, finance, they have a representative, and we define that specific role. And underneath them are the service owners and the service providers. And, if you're interested, we could share our documentation on how we put that together and presented it to management. But that having those roles defined and them knowing that there's a service delivery manager that's looking at how well their services are doing, and then those people get together monthly with us to make sure that the services are delivering correctly. I think that helped to define those roles.
Perfect. We've got a couple more questions. We'll get them as we continue. I know we've got some slides coming up that address the existing questions, so we're caught up for now.
Okay, great. So really, we actually started first by defining our services and service offerings. And actually, we didn't know in one of the implementations what this portfolio and taxonomy field was on our service definition form, which caused us some initial issue, but we resolved that. So what we've actually done is, we put some major focus. Jack and I worked on this and made some decisions to not overcomplicate what we called our taxonomy. This is not our user portal taxonomy. This is our internal service reporting taxonomy. And we defined basically separating our DPM reporting aspects based on portfolio, which is lab operations, and I may have made reference before as kind of our business functionality to align with more corporate functions, like you're seeing here with human resources and communications and IT's in there, and quality, so forth and so on. And then we also are moving into the programmatic service areas, and those will be defined more based off of lab terminology, because we are dealing with scientists, and to do appropriate level reporting, we need to be thinking at that level. But that's how we built out our taxonomy, and actually separated our portfolio reporting. But right now, we don't feel a separate portfolio is appropriate at the scientific level for each area of the lab, even though we do science for multiple different types of science. Okay. One of our earlier challenges that we were defining our services through what would be considered an impossible process. We had service owners and managers defining services, putting them into Excel forms, which Caitlin made reference to in a previous webinar, then sending them to me at the lab as the service level manager to manually enter into ServiceNow. This was a slow process, which really had multiple bottlenecks at multiple points. So one of our early implementations was the use of Service Builder, which provided us that ability to have a logical and organized manner and simple way of building out our services and service offerings and maintaining those services and service offerings in a distributed method. And we basically use the roles, standard roles within ServiceNow, to control that. As a note, during and after implementation, evidence showed that the service owners and the delegates embraced the use of the tool. They did not like the previous method because it was slow and cumbersome. Service owners and managers could now see their updates immediately after making their service definition changes. I want to give a plug here now that I strongly recommend, if you see any related office hours or webinars related to Service Builder or DPM, that you attend those, because they're great discussion points and presentation points for using the tool, especially as it matures. So, Jack?
Thanks, Mike. And why did we move to DPM? Understand we were one of the early adopters of DPM, but again, we wanted something that gave us a taxonomy based on our services. It provided a standard set of reports and KPIs for managing our service portfolio instead of our custom reports. It provides the capability for managing a service or element of a service, not just at the run state, but through demand and project to retirement. It's all across the life cycle, and it's in one tool. And then the ability to use the enterprise portfolio to allow service owners through our C-level executives access to service performance is a game changer in our move to service delivery organization. And then we've spent some time using personal portfolios, especially when they first came out, because we have service owners that are also business application owners in APM. And instead of going to two different dashboards, we can give them a view all in one spot. Mike?
As with all good stories, there's often challenges. Ours primarily came as the result that DPM was new when we implemented at both Argonne as well as ServiceNow. It is important to note that DPM is not just a plug and play solution. You need to understand how DPM works and what gives you the results. For example, reporting areas are aligned to a thing known as KPI groups, and the KPI groups depend on use of performance analytics. Next, we started with Roam back in the Roam instance, which was its first release of the tool. That introduced challenges that we do not feel are there today, especially in the areas of documentation, as well as there were, with any implementation, some bugs in the tool that Caitlin and her team have addressed. The biggest challenge with minimal documentation was configuring the solution. So we did not realize a true relationship between the service offerings and KPI groups and performance analytics and all those type of things. And that caused some confusion in our initial results. And in regards to bugs, like I said, Caitlin and her team have definitely addressed that. And then along with the tool being ready, we had some internal challenges, some of which have already been mentioned. We had to emphasize that DPM is a managerial tool and that will allow for managing based on services. Traditional IT thinking in Argonne was to only communicate in regards to organization and technical configuration items. Also, you need to make sure you understand your environment, and if you are an early adopter of ServiceNow, that you understood any customizations that may have come along. For example, we found that changes made to our ticket states impacted what was actually being reported in our performance analytics. Despite these challenges, we feel we made the right decision to go to DPM when we did. That being said, we did not resolve all these issues ourselves. We did get help.
Yeah, to Mike's point, after we stood up DPM in Rome, we realized it was a little more complicated than we thought. So we used some end of year monies to bring in a consulting partner for a short-term engagement. It was about 2 months. And we brought in Third Era. They did bring a working knowledge of DPM at the level it was when it first came out. And they also could test in their clean instances and compare it to our instance to help find out where customizations we have built were causing problems. So that was extremely helpful getting started. And then they were a good sounding board. They were still learning about DPM. We were still learning about DPM. So they fed stuff back to ServiceNow. We fed stuff back to ServiceNow. So it was kind of a mutual partnership, and we both grew together. There are a couple of outstanding issues that we ran into with DPM. So you can't link record producers to service offerings. That's still kind of a thing we're hoping for. And then initially when we related a service offering to a catalog item, they started to disappear from the portal, and we didn't know that. But then somebody, one of the service providers would call and say, "Where did my catalog item go?" And Mike and I scratched our heads. And early on, and it depends on what version of ServiceNow you're running, but you either had to set the subscribers on an offering or you had to set the available for on a catalog item. If both of them were blank, then the catalog item disappeared. In Service Builder, every time you go into Service Builder, even if you're just looking something up, be careful because you'll wind up with a draft version. So you got to watch over those draft versions and keep them clean. And then in DPM, and there's been a lot of work around this, but the numbers by default are averages over a specific date range. You can set this, but whatever you pick, make sure you let your service owners know the way you're going and what they're seeing. And then some of the original KPI reports said not configured yet, and there was no content. And we were confused by that because we thought we had everything running right. Well, it turns out another customization bit us. We had gone through a security audit with ServiceNow, and they came back and said, "Oh, you should change the job that all your the account that all your jobs run under to something different. By default, it comes as sysadmin. Change it to something else like job admin." So we had done that. Well, our developers had done that. Not everybody that was like a business owner in the tool knew that. So once we set the right permissions on the jobs that we're running, we actually started seeing data, but that confused us for a little bit about what was going on there. So, and then also remember when you make changes in DPM, like Mike said, it's not an operational instant data tool. So the jobs have to run overnight a lot of times for data to appear. And there's more documentation from Caitlin's team on what's an instant change versus what has to take overnight. Next slide. And then this is to the question on CSDM. We started with CSDM 2 and trying to align to that, but the common service data model has evolved a lot over the last year. So along with DPM and using APM and maturing our configuration database, we've been growing along with the common service data model. So like we said, started in 2013, we made a bunch of customizations. We initially built our own APM versions so we could track end of life tools. So initially APM was owned by our developers, not by enterprise architecture. Our, what are we calling it now? APM Reboot 2 that we're going through this year is moving it out of the developers' hands into the enterprise architecture hands, and trying to align with CSDM 4, because we found out across the board, not just in DPM, but in like SPM, that if we didn't align with this, we're not seeing data. So we have to make sure that our CMDB is set up correctly. We're defining our application services correctly. We're defining our capabilities correctly, and we're building the right linkage between the different elements.
Couple questions here. So did your reassignment count increase when you introduced service offerings?
Yes, because it wasn't so much service offerings. They were in conjunction, and Mike can jump in on this too. We started using the support group on the CMDB. So on configurations item, you can set a support group, you can set a change group, and you can set an approval group. You set the support group, then any ticket form, like your incident form, when you put that CI in, it'll set the support group. It'll default who that support group should go to. So we had to build logic that if you filled in a CI and you filled in a service offering, or you filled in a service, which one of those drove the support group routing? And we didn't get it right the first time. We played with that a few times. And we have to keep telling the service desk that's a recommendation. You still have to read the ticket. Don't just put in your service offering configuration item and then hit deliver. You're tier 1, read the ticket, make sure it's right. You might want to change it. Those are recommendations. So we did initially see some reassignment counts where it went out, and then people get mad and send it, tier 2 would send it back to the service desk going, hey, this isn't our ticket. You could do this. So
Thank you. We got a question from Mike. Did you drop measuring availability of applications and move to availability of tech and business services?
What it's interesting you bring that up, because that's one of the more recent implemented requests, actually from our chief operating officer at the lab. We're reporting availability based off of service, which is tied to outages, which we're tying to our major incident management functionality from ServiceNow. So yeah, we are doing that shift. Even though it is still tied to the CI, we're not reporting in DPM, at least on that. We have that information because the CI helps drive what service it's related to, as the CSDM shows. But yes, outage availability is based off of service, and that's how we report it as part of DPM. Anything else?
What's your experience been with the DPM workspace? Has that been openly accepted? Has it been easy to navigate? There's a question out there from the audience. What your experience has been like with the DPM workspace itself?
I think we cover that in slides, or Mike, you can cheat and tell them ahead of time.
Yeah,
We can save that. I'll save it.
we'll save it, and we don't answer it at the end, we'll emphasize that point.
Okay.
So initially, in the service out, there was a tool called Service Owner Workspace, which was fine for what we initially were looking at, which is primarily in the run space. It's kind of like which processes do you initially implement when you look at ITIL. So we were looking at incident requests and problems, but one of the key things, ServiceNow started talking about in webinars about this tool called DPM back in, the early days, before 2013.
Not
And
2013, yeah, not that old.
not that old, I'm sorry. Yeah, back when we implemented. But
Caitlin
anyhow,
was like in college then, so.
so anyhow, we back, we were looking at implementing Service Owner Workspace, and then looking at the deployment, we then decided that, you know what, DPM brought us the ability to work in the plan and build environment. But our initial implementation was, and I will tell you, was focused in the operational run type environment. But as with ITIL 4, we wanted to make sure we matured into that plan and build space. Whoops, sorry, click. And that's where we're doing a lot of focus right now, is how we look at implementing in those areas. Our primary focus right now is still in that run space, but managing across the service activity lifecycle is a key contributor to why we chose DPM rather than staying with the direction of going to Service Owner Workspace, which may even be decommissioned at this time. So to emphasize our need for DPM, we feel we needed to restate our points across history and tell you briefly about our future, all required the need for DPM. Our road to service reporting started as early as part of the service level management maturity. We started by defining services on Excel forms and passing them to me as the service level manager, and I would then update ServiceNow. Reports were being generated using tools like Excel, and there was no control of report data filtering or presentation format. Information control was really limited. It was in September of 2021 that through, and this is where correction of my dates here, 2021, that through input from multiple webinars that Caitlin, you may have been, I believe, were part of, we agreed to use DPM over our current solutions, and even those provided by ServiceNow. The ability to manage across the life cycle of a service was key in that decision. We started the development of DPM and Service Builder in July of 2022 in the Rome instance, and DPM was new to us as well as ServiceNow. With some assistance, we deployed Service Builder in January of 2023 and DPM in March of that year. This was after our upgrade to Tokyo and the end of year holidays. The logical flow of Service Builder made training a simple task for our service owners and service managers, while release of the tools outside of IT took place later in 2023. We now look to expanding the use of DPM as part of our continual improvement. DPM will be key in our major overhaul of what we originally deployed as DPM, and Catalog Builder, Employee Center, and Service Operations Workspace are next on our radar, with Strategic Portfolio Management and Enterprise Architecture Workspace after that. We see the newer capabilities in ServiceNow as a method to align to what Jack previously stated was the CSDM model. DPM will be our tool for measurement and alignment with these deployments.
Are you planning on introducing digital products as well?
That's the enterprise architecture team is looking at that to see if they want to add that to the mix. or not right now. We have a lot of custom apps at Argonne that have been built over the years, and we're trying to clean that up. So they're not sure. Do you want me to, I can't help but look over at the chat, and Lewis was asking about how we have the required fields on our incident form. I could hit that
Yes.
one really quick.
Absolutely.
So Lewis asked, do we do business service offering in CI, or do we do CI like business service offering? We do CI first. We had configuration item on our form long before we had the services added. So we just left it there because a lot of the stuff had a configuration item. And then where we can map out the business service and the service offering, like our application services, we can auto populate those. If it's around like a endpoint device, we know it's an endpoint service. So, you know, we're trying to make some intelligent decisions based on what we know around the configuration item to auto populate the other fields right now. It's not perfect, but we're doing some of it.
And it's important to note that our non-IT folks really don't have incidents. They primarily work in requests. So
Well, they don't work incidents, right?
yeah, they don't work incidents. Yeah, so it's not a challenge outside of IT, like you would find in the business functions, like HR and finance.
Right. Cool. All right. So we did want to give a shout out. If you're doing DPM, there's some resources out there that are really useful. This knowledge base article that Caitlin's team put together, actually, a couple of years ago, is extremely helpful. There's getting started guides and videos. No matter where you're at, it's worth looking at. I like the getting started guide. It helps you decide if you're going to try to manage services or business applications or application services. Where do you want to start at? Do you want to do all of it? Which data should you use? It's really helpful for that. Then there's the data source spreadsheet that tells you where the KPI data should be pulled from. That's also helpful for troubleshooting. And then customer satisfaction in DPM. Again, it's not how well did the technician deliver, but is my service delivering what you asked for? So that'll show you how to set that up, put in your stakeholders, make sure that they're pulled on a regular basis so you can make decisions around the service. And then the run services guide is really nice because it helps you getting started with the run tab. A lot of the labs we talk to, at least internally, the other DOE labs, are at that run state, and then they're trying to move backwards to demand and project. And that run services guide will help you with, what's out there right now and see how well you're doing. And then one of my favorites, and again, it's a little bit dated, but the digital portfolio management and CSDM overview that was done by Mark Bodman and Caitlin Morse is a really good video to give you an overview of how this is all being put together and where it's going.
Yeah. In the early stages of DPM development, we realized that showing some of the content would introduce confusion. Unfortunately, at that time, the only answer was to use UI Builder, which is not an easy tool for those of us that have tried. But ServiceNow provided us some configuration tools. After our upgrade to Tokyo, then Vancouver, we were excited to discover an administration function in DPM, which allows us to update the view of our managers. Recently we have made note, and once again, talking back to office hours for DPM was just presented. ServiceNow has released Admin Center, which is very helpful in configuring the tool for use. Because at Go Live, we left things as it, just, our process was don't change anything, go live with what ServiceNow is providing. But Admin Center is going to provide us the capability to make some of the modifications that we wanted to make in a much easier way than using UI Builder.
Yeah, and then We've said it a bunch of times, performance analytics is key to DPM. We highly recommend you take the Performance Analytics Essentials class, which is free from ServiceNow, or you can pay for the Performance Analytics Fundamentals class, which is like 2.5 days. We are always looking at the scores for this indicator to make sure that we've got data there and to check the data that's there. So it's a really great way to troubleshoot your data if your numbers don't look right once you stand up DPM. So did we deliver? We really think we did. We were going to call this slide Go Ask Alice, but that's a Jefferson Airplane reference and not Lewis Carroll. So from an alignment standpoint, we finally have a view showing our service taxonomy. From a little overhead standpoint, service owners have embraced service builder as a way to update their information and to share their data in DPM. They now go into DPM as the place to go for their service information. Mike and I meet with our service delivery managers, the SDG members, monthly, separately from the month altogether meeting, and we always bring up DPM as the starting point on how things are going. The data is intuitive, right? So your KPI groups are across the board. Everybody knows what we're looking at. So we're not building custom reports for different organizations. From a cultural change perspective, it's helped us shift from organizational to more understanding of services across the lab operations environment. And then from an enterprise strategic view, the capabilities in DPM in parallel with the capabilities from SPM, they just link together basically. I mean, you know, they give you that holistic view all the way across. So we think DPM's delivered for us. And then Mike?
Yeah. After the long wait for a simple solution to managerial performance of the services, our CIO was actually very excited and said, "This is what I've been waiting for." Our new Chief Operating Officer for the lab is also asking for standard reporting for lab organization. This has introduced some new work for Jack and I, but it's not totally with DPM, but in improving service performance to our customers. We do not see this implementation as a one and done effort. We are currently on the Vancouver release of ServiceNow, and DPM is a key part of our continual improvement efforts, including the maturing of our KPIs, service unique SLAs, and maturing DPM use beyond run. We will also need to focus on aligning stakeholders to services and ensuring there's a formal method to request business services. When in doubt, we are directing the creation of request catalog items to each business-related service offering. We do not see what we called out as challenges or referred to as regrets. This is our roadmap for now and into the future. And we thank you very much and are ready to answer any other questions, hopefully.
Thank you. That was really, really helpful. We had a lot of chatter. There's a few questions still out there. So I'll go ahead and start with some of them. What is the highest level of portfolio you've defined underneath your taxonomies?
So we actually use the portfolio to differentiate, as I showed on the one slide, between lab operations, which would be considered our corporate type functions, HR, finance, IT, and then now we're breaking it apart because the lab is divided based on sciences at a second level portfolio as the programmatics, which is probably a
research areas
for science. Yeah. So that's the level we're currently at. We do realize that if that programmatic area gets more complex, we may have to differentiate portfolios based off of the individual scientific areas. But for now, that's the level we went at the portfolio. And then we worked very hard to try to keep the taxonomy simple, because there's a constant push to want to make that organizational. And we try to explain, because like any organization, reorg is common. and we try to make people understand that services don't align 100% to organization; they align to service groupings.
Well, with that, there's a customer out here, they have 2,600 service offerings. So how has it been for Argonne to rework or, merge, split, reform your services and restructure them?
Okay, we don't have that many, but what we actually started with, and this is something to consider, we kind of used the 7 ± 2 concept on service to service offering relationships, and we actually started our exercise. It helped. It was pre-COVID, with Post-it notes, and we brought each organization into a conference room, and Jack and I would just basically start writing Post-it notes. There was no wrong answer, and then we started saying, well, we tried to simplify that by saying, what are the logical groupings? Because I mean, without knowing their business in detail, we realized we needed to keep things as simple as possible. And we actually struggle with that, where some organizations want to break things down into more finite detail. We actually struggle to try to keep that, like I said, ±7 concept. I'd be curious, are those in the all within IT, or are those across your enterprise? And if so, how many services do you have, and what's the relationship number? Because the other thing to remember, one of the things we put as a rule at Argonne is that you can't put the application name into the service. So email isn't Outlook, it's email, as an example. One of the terms that our infrastructure support people want is they use the term endpoint rather than having, and I can understand how you could break it out to Apple and Windows-based computers, but right now they're consolidated. And we use the CI to actually help differentiate some of that information.
Awesome.
So it's a struggle, but you may want to look at your service offerings and see how many of them are really saying the same thing. Just as a thought.
Time for a few more questions here. Did you find it difficult to define or even find your owners of business services and certain taxonomy groups?
We actually, when we started out, with the CIO support and lab operations, the service owners are our top level leadership within IT, and we've carried that forward into our other lab operations areas. So they're the end decision makers. Let's to say it that way. And then the service offering, and then we have service managers, which are that next level of leaders or managers to help, and those are the people responsible to go to a RACI type format. The service owner is accountable, where the service manager is responsible. And those, I call those the worker managers. And we've carried that into the lab operations areas as well. Because, kind of following a standard definition is the service owner owns what goes on in that for that service, and is the final one that the lab director is going to go to if there's an issue.
We are at time. We can certainly stay for a few more minutes if that's okay with you, Mike and Jack, or if you do have a stop, we can go ahead and leave it there.
I got to drop. I got to run a ITAM meeting across the National Labs, but
I could stay
But
for a
thanks.
few extra minutes if there's a couple other questions.
Thank you, Michael. So yeah, are you using the resource management features?
Not
No.
fully. I'll grab that one. We're not
Yeah.
fully using it. Actually, one of the programmatic areas uses it for their project management because they're the accelerator. So they use it to manage the project of taking the accelerator down, upgrading it, and then standing it back up. The lab is not really good at resource management, to be honest. So we've looked at it, but we haven't really embraced it.
Did you find that once your users were managing and looking at DPM, did they begin to appreciate the CSDM more and actually help you keep your services maintained more efficiently?
Oh, that's like I said, we're still dealing with cultural change on some of that, um, in that aspect. But I think outside of IT, it's a little bit easier because they think in terms of services and service offerings already, using that terminology. Um, but I think there's that mindset is changing, that cultural change, and it's just having the data available. And like I said, we've
But
actually found some.
yeah, I would say our users really aren't that in tune to CSDM, but enterprise architecture has realized how important it is. Our enterprise application owners the developers have realized how important it is. So they're starting to partner with Mike and I to make sure that we set things up correctly. I wouldn't say our users completely, or even
Right.
some of the service owners, but the back end structure is forming there now.
Okay. Just one final question, and then I think we'll wrap it up. So, are you also measuring degradation KPIs along with the availability of your services?
At this point, I would say no. Um, if degradation, purely, like I said, we're primarily with the out of the box KPIs right now. Um, we do look at incidents and availability,
I
within
mean, you use
IT.
availability
Yeah,
though. You do say this is a degraded service versus
right.
completely out, but we're not. It's all manual on our side.
Yeah.
So
All right. Think we're caught up. We'll catch up later, and we'll send a follow-up email out to everyone that registered with some resources. We definitely have some great resources to share in addition to what Argonne has presented. So thank you everyone for attending. Mike, Jack, thank you so much for your help and
take care.
your story here.
Okay. Thank you. Take care now.
Bye.
Bye.